The wedding was beautiful, at least on the outside. String lights curled through the garden trees like fairy dust had been poured from above. Music floated in the air, and the scent of lavender and fresh roses filled every breath. But under all the celebration, there was something bitter clinging to my skin. It wasn't nerves. It was the whispers, the laughter, the cruel kind that comes with smug glances and hidden grins. I stood near the altar, dressed in ivory lace and trembling joy, holding his hand, Daniel's hand. My husband. He looked so calm, so at ease, like the entire world couldn't touch us. His suit was simple, his tie a bit crooked, and his shoes weren't some designer name. But his eyes? His eyes held me like I was the only thing that mattered. That's when I heard it again. "She's throwing her life away," my father said, loud enough for the third row to hear. "Marrying a guy who probably can't even pay for his own tux." My mother laughed with a tightness in her throat. We told her. But of course, she wouldn't listen. Just had to follow her heart. Their words didn't hurt as much as the way people looked at Daniel afterward. Some with pity, others with mockery, and some just turned away, like the whole thing was a sad story unfolding in real time. Daniel squeezed my hand, whispering low, "Don't let them ruin this. This day, it's ours, not theirs." I smiled at him, genuinely, warmly, and nodded. I wouldn't let them win. But my smile shattered when my uncle leaned over to someone and chuckled, "Can't wait to see how long this one lasts." The music swelled. I walked down the aisle with Daniel beside me, every step layered in a mix of shame and pride. I didn't regret choosing him, but I regretted inviting most of the people here. At the reception, things only got worse. My cousin Michelle actually clinked her glass, stood up, and made a joke toast. "To Natalie," she said, raising her champagne flute, "for choosing love over logic. For choosing whatever this is over a secure future." She giggled. Bold move. I felt my chest tighten. Daniel looked down at his plate and said nothing. I wanted to speak, to say something, to defend him, to scream. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I whispered, "Excuse me," stood up and walked outside. I needed air before I broke in front of everyone. The cool wind slapped my face the moment I stepped out. I stood near the hedge, trying not to cry. My wedding day, and they were treating it like a mistake they were all forced to watch. That's when I heard the blades. A soft, growing rhythm in the air, like a heart thumping in the sky. And then I saw it. A sleek, jet-black helicopter gliding through the clouds, moving closer. People started pointing, murmuring. The music stopped. Even Michelle's annoying laugh died in her throat. The helicopter circled once, then gently lowered onto the large open lawn behind the garden. Everyone stood frozen. My dad whispered, "What the hell?" The door of the chopper opened, and out stepped a man in a clean black uniform, Daniel's assistant, Malik. He walked with purpose, holding a small velvet box in one hand and a tablet in the other. His voice was calm, but it carried through the stunned silence. "Mr. Daniel Rowan," Malik announced, approaching us slowly. "The board meeting is ready. They're waiting for your confirmation." Daniel stood, brushing imaginary lint off his jacket like it was nothing. And then he turned to me, kissed my cheek, and said, "I'll only be gone for 20 minutes. They're voting on the final merger." Everyone looked at him like they'd seen a ghost. "Merger?" My dad blurted. Daniel nodded, calm as ever. "Yeah. The acquisition of Altair Global. It closes today. Sorry for the interruption." He turned to his assistant. "Hold them for 5 more minutes. I need to finish dessert with my wife." My mom dropped her fork. My cousin sat down slowly, blinking at him. And me? I just smiled. Because finally, they saw what I had always known. He wasn't who they thought. And the best part? He had never needed to prove it. He just was. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. You could hear the clink of a spoon dropping on fine china from across the garden. Eyes darted from Daniel to Malik to the helicopter, and then back to me. I stood in my gown, the breeze catching the veil behind me, and for the first time that day, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel pitted. I felt seen. Daniel sat down like nothing had happened, pulled the chair next to him closer, and invited me to sit. I did, the corners of my mouth tugging at a knowing smile I no longer had to hide. "Altair Global," my uncle stammered. "That Altair?" Daniel nodded casually, sipping his water.
"Yeah."
One of the few renewable energy giants still privately held. But not for long. My father leaned forward, red creeping into his cheeks. "You mean you work for them?" Daniel's eyes never flinched. "I own controlling shares. I bought out the founder's private stake earlier this year. The board is finalizing a public-private merger. I'll retain executive control." You could practically hear jaws hit the table. Michelle's champagne flute slipped slightly in her hand. "Wait, what? But you said you were in consulting." "I am," Daniel said. "Private wealth, strategic transitions, legacy investing." "It's niche." My mother blinked, her lipstick slightly smudged, still holding the spoon midair. "So you're not broke?" Daniel chuckled gently. Not smugly. Just softly, like the answer should have been obvious all along.
"No, ma'am."
Not even close. Then he turned to me, only me, and said, "I just didn't think anyone's net worth should matter more than their worth to you." I swallowed hard. There it was again. That quiet, steady way he had of reminding me what love actually looked like. Not flashy, not loud, but true. The waiter came by with cake. No one touched theirs. My dad suddenly stood. "Why didn't you tell us?" Daniel's voice didn't rise. "Because Natalie asked me not to. She didn't want anyone thinking this wedding was about anything but love." Everyone turned to look at me. I felt the weight of their gazes, the stunned curiosity, the shame slowly creeping onto their own faces. "I wanted to marry a man who treated me with respect," I said, voice steady. "Not someone who flaunted wealth to win approval." Daniel reached for my hand. I didn't hesitate this time. My cousin Michelle, still blinking like she'd just awakened from a strange dream, stammered, "So, you're, like, rich? Daniel smiled. "We don't really talk like that in my business circles. But yes, you could say that." Someone behind us finally dared to whisper, "That's her husband?" And another, "I thought he drove a beat-up Camry?"
"He did."
That was the beauty of it. Daniel chose simplicity. He wore no branded suits, avoided the spotlight, never bragged. Not because he was hiding, but because he didn't need validation. Especially not from people who judged worth by wallet size. As Daniel rose from his seat to take the call from the boardroom on his jet, my father tried again. "Look, son, we didn't know." "You didn't care to," I interrupted.
Calmly. Clearly.
"You made up your mind when you saw he didn't fit your box." He paused, then nodded slowly. "Maybe we were wrong." Daniel looked back at them with the same kindness I'd always admired in him. "Maybe you weren't wrong," he said. "Maybe you just didn't wait long enough to be right." Then he turned back toward the chopper, Malik following, tablet glowing. Everyone watched him go. The man they laughed at. The man they pitied. Now they couldn't even meet his eyes. I turned to my mom and dad. "You asked me why I never brought him to dinner. That's why." They were speechless. And it was oddly peaceful. As the helicopter lifted off, I stood and walked slowly back inside. My guests parted like water around a rock. No one laughed now. No one whispered. Because when you stand in your truth, when you love someone for who they are, not what they look like on paper, the world notices. And sometimes it lands in a helicopter just to prove a point. The helicopter disappeared into the clouds, its blades echoing like the fading heartbeat of a moment none of them would ever forget. I stayed outside for a few seconds longer, letting the wind lift the edge of my gown, my fingers still tingling from Daniel's touch. When I stepped back into the reception hall, it was as if the room itself had changed shape. The colors were the same. The lights still twinkled. But the expressions, those had shifted. Gone were the smug glances, the arrogant smirks. All that remained were wide eyes, twitching mouths, and a collective effort not to choke on their own pride. And suddenly, they didn't know how to treat me anymore. My cousin Riley, who earlier avoided introducing her fiancé to us, now walked over like we'd always been close. "Nat, babe, Why didn't you tell us? I mean, seriously, this is like Hollywood-level drama. I smiled politely. It wasn't about drama. It was about love. She tried to laugh, but it was strained.
Right. Right.
But still, dang, girl. My Aunt Charlotte leaned in, whispering, I always said you had good instincts.
A lie.
She once told my mother I lacked taste because I didn't chase after doctors or hedge fund babies. I remembered. Everyone remembered. Daniel didn't need revenge. Their own words had become it. I made my way to the bridal table, sitting in the chair Daniel had vacated. My mother approached, slow and hesitant, like she was finally unsure of her role in my life. You could have told me, Natalie, she murmured. I turned toward her, meeting her eyes. And if I had, I asked softly, would you have loved him more? Or just pretended to? She didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. The value of a man should never have been a dollar amount. But to them, it always was. Until now. He's kind. I continued. He brings me tea when I'm sick. He listens to me ramble when I can't sleep. He takes care of his employees like their family. That's who I married. Tears welled in her eyes, but not the kind you'd expect. These weren't tears of guilt. Not really. They were tears of loss. Because in that moment, she realized she had judged a treasure and found herself lacking. Your father and I, she started, but her voice broke. We just wanted you to be taken care of. I know, I said gently, but you didn't trust that I could do that for myself, or that someone like Daniel could. My father stood nearby, pretending to fix his tie, but I could see him listening. His posture had changed. Shoulders slumped. No longer the proud patriarch, just a man who misjudged, deeply and publicly. A few more guests came by. Some tried flattery. Some offered awkward congratulations. Most just stayed quiet, realizing that anything they said might sound like backtracking. It was almost funny how quickly admiration replaced disdain. And all Daniel had to do was be himself. I pulled out my phone, heart fluttering as a message came in from him. Merger approved. Coming back to celebrate properly. Tell them not to eat all the cake. I laughed under my breath, but my hand shook. Because beneath all the glitter of this unexpected twist, something deeper stirred inside me. All those years of doubting my choices, second-guessing my heart because others didn't approve, they didn't matter anymore. Daniel didn't just marry me. He chose me, despite the noise, despite the pressure, despite the whispers. And now, the people who claimed to love me most had to sit in the reality that they were the ones who needed to change. Kindness was what Daniel showed me. It's what I wanted to show them. But kindness wasn't weakness. Kindness could be the most powerful revenge of all. By the time Daniel returned, the entire tone of the wedding had shifted. Gone was the hushed gossip, the judgmental stares, the fake smiles veiled in pity. Now people stood straighter when he walked past. They smiled too wide. They offered their hands too quickly. You could almost smell the desperation to fix what they had broken just hours before. Daniel, of course, handled it with grace. The kind of grace that comes not from wealth, but from knowing exactly who you are. He took my hand the moment he stepped back into the reception hall, like nothing had changed, because in his heart, nothing had. He wasn't suddenly more powerful. He wasn't suddenly more desirable. He had always been that man. The world was just catching up. I miss the speeches, he whispered, leaning in with a smirk. Did your cousin get any funnier? I laughed. She choked on her own toast. It was poetic. He grinned, then kissed the back of my hand like it was the first time. The crowd watched closely, maybe waiting for him to slip up, maybe hoping to figure out how someone like him ended up with someone like me. But they missed the real story. We didn't marry to prove anything. We married because we already had. As the servers brought out slices of the triple layer cake, my father finally made his move. He approached the table with deliberate steps, clearing his throat like a man about to give a TED Talk. But what came out was softer, almost uncertain. I owe you both an apology. My fork paused midair. Daniel looked up, expression unreadable. My dad continued, I judged you before I knew you. I let assumptions cloud my heart, and he glanced at me, eyes heavier than I'd seen in years. I hurt my daughter in the process. I blinked. That part. I wasn't expecting. I was wrong, he finished. Daniel didn't rush to forgive. He let the moment settle. Then he nodded once and said, "Thank you." Not dramatic. Not condescending. Just sincere. "I hope," my dad added, "that maybe we can start over." I didn't say anything right away. There was so much I wanted to release. The pain, the anger, the years of trying to make them proud.
But I looked at Daniel.
At the way he was choosing peace over ego. Kindness over triumph. And I realized we didn't need a dramatic confrontation. We needed healing. "I'm open to it," I said, finally. "But it has to be real this time." My father nodded, and for the first time, I believed him. Later that night, when most of the guests had gone home and the fairy lights blinked like lazy stars above us, Daniel and I slow danced alone in the garden. His hand rested on my waist, my head tucked against his chest. It was quiet, no music, no audience. Just us. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "They saw who you are today," I whispered. He held me a little tighter. "All that matters is you always did." I pulled back to look at him. "Thank you. For everything. For letting them figure it out on their own." He smiled, brushing hair from my face. "They needed to learn the hard way. And you deserved to see them learn." We stood like that for a long time, swaying, breathing, healing. And in that moment, under the soft hum of distant laughter and rustling leaves, I realized something. My wedding wasn't just about marrying the love of my life. It was about shedding the weight of everyone else's expectations. It was about choosing my path, even when no one else could see it. It was about love. And that love, it landed in a helicopter. 2 weeks later, we sat on the balcony of our new home, barefoot, sipping coffee with the city's skyline glittering in the distance. The wedding had come and gone, but the impact still echoed like distant thunder in family group chats and hushed conversations over brunch tables. They didn't talk about the flowers or the venue.
They talked about him.
The man they thought was a loser. The man who made them all pause, reflect, and question the way they measured worth. And me? They talked about me too, but differently now. They said things like she always had good intuition, or she was smart to keep it quiet. The tone had changed. But I didn't let their newfound respect define me, because I had already learned the most important lesson. Validation that comes late isn't validation at all. It's just people catching up. Daniel was in the kitchen making pancakes. Yes, the Daniel Rowan, multi-millionaire, boardroom slayer, helicopter rider, now wearing pajama pants with little foxes on them, humming while flipping flapjacks. "Why are you smiling like that?" he asked, glancing over. "Because you're ridiculous," I said, laughing softly. "And also perfect." He carried over a plate like it was a treasure, setting it before me with a theatrical bow. For the woman who didn't care about my money, but still ended up with all of it. I laughed. That's one way to summarize our love story. But deep down, we both knew it wasn't about the money. It was about moments, values, the quiet things, like how he texted me before every big meeting just to say, "You've got this." Like how I'd sit on the bathroom floor beside him when his anxiety flared up after high-stakes calls, because yes, even men with helicopters feel small sometimes. Like how we promised each other during one midnight walk long before the wedding, no matter how loud the world gets, we'll listen to each other first. That was the vow that mattered most. The public now saw Daniel differently. He was profiled in business magazines, invited to podcasts. One reporter called me the wife who stayed silent through the storm. Another tried to romanticize the whole thing, saying it was a real-life Cinderella story. But I wasn't rescued. I chose. And so did he. Months later, at a quiet family dinner, just us, my parents, and Daniel, my father poured him a glass of wine and said with careful gratitude, "You turned out to be the man we didn't know we needed." Daniel simply replied, "I was always that man. You just didn't know how to see him." And my mother, eyes glassy, placed her hand on mine and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we didn't deserve it." It didn't erase the past, but it softened it. That night, I found a letter tucked in my purse. It was from Daniel. He had written it the night before our wedding but never gave it to me until now. It said, "If they laugh, let them. If they doubt me, let them. If they walk away from you because of me, I'll build a world so safe, so real, that you'll never need to look back. Not because they don't matter, but because you finally know you do." I cried, not because I was sad, but because this man, this so-called loser, had rewritten everything I thought I knew about strength. It didn't live in revenge. It lived in quiet integrity. It didn't roar in the face of cruelty. It endured, then rose. So, if you ever find yourself standing in a room where no one believes in the person beside you, don't shout. Don't fight to convince them. Just hold their hand tighter. Because sometimes love's loudest answer comes in the form of a helicopter landing on a lawn full of doubters.